She was just 7 years old, clutching a homeless man's hand as her father's angry shouts echoed behind them. Neither the little girl nor her father knew that this homeless man controlled billions, or that he'd just found his heir. We're curious. Where in the world are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more life-changing stories. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the small apartment as Emma Watson cowered behind her bedroom door. Her father's drunken rage was getting worse. At 7 years old, Emma had already learned to read his moods, to know when to hide, when to be invisible. Tonight was different. The shouting was louder, the crashes more violent. "Where's my money? Emma, where are you hiding?" Emma's small hands trembled as she grabbed her worn teddy bear and the $5 she'd been saving for her school field trip. She knew what she had to do. The fire escape was just outside her window. She'd used it before when things got bad, hiding on the rooftop until her father passed out. But tonight felt more dangerous. She slipped out the window with practiced ease, her pink sneakers barely making a sound on the metal stairs. The November chill bit through her thin jacket, but fear kept her moving. She reached the alley behind their apartment building and ran. "Emma!" her father's voice bellowed from above. She looked up to see him leaning out her bedroom window, face contorted in anger. "Get back here!" Emma ran faster, her heart pounding in her chest. She darted around corners, through the darkening streets of Boston, with no destination in mind. Just away, away from the shouting, away from the fear. She found herself in a part of the city she didn't recognize. Storefronts were closed, streets emptier. A light drizzle began to fall, making her shiver. Emma slowed her pace, suddenly aware of how alone she was. That's when she saw him. A man sitting against a brick wall, bundled in layers of worn clothing, a cardboard sign beside him. Any kindness appreciated. Something about his eyes made Emma pause. They were clear, alert, and kind. Not like the other homeless people she sometimes saw, whose gazes seemed distant or desperate. This man was watching people pass by with a curious intensity. "Are you okay, little one?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle and articulate. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Emma hesitated. Her mother had always told her not to talk to strangers. But her mother wasn't here anymore, hadn't been for 2 years. And there was something about this man that didn't feel threatening. "I'm hiding," she admitted, clutching her teddy bear tighter. The man nodded, as if hiding was the most natural thing in the world. "Sometimes we all need to hide. I'm Bob." He didn't ask her name, didn't press for details. Instead, he just shifted slightly, making space beside him under the small awning that kept the drizzle at bay. Emma took a tentative step closer. "I'm Emma. I have $5. Are you hungry?" Bob's expression changed, a mixture of surprise and something deeper that Emma couldn't name. "You're offering me your money?" he asked softly. Emma nodded. "Mum always said to help people when you can." Before Bob could respond, a shout pierced the quiet street. "Emma!" Her father's voice wasn't far away. Emma froze, terror washing over her face. Instinctively, she reached for Bob's hand. "He's mad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, can you help me hide?" Bob looked from Emma to the direction of the voice, his expression hardening. In that moment, something shifted in the man's eyes. A decision made. "Yes," he said simply, standing up with unexpected agility. "I can help you hide." He took Emma's hand, and they slipped away into the shadows of Boston's back streets, as the angry calls of her father grew more distant behind them. Bob led Emma through a maze of narrow alleys, with the confidence of someone who knew every hidden corner of the city. His posture had changed. The stooped shoulders of a defeated man were now straight and purposeful. Emma struggled to keep up, her small legs taking 2 steps for each of his. "Where are we going?" she asked, breathless. "Somewhere safe," Bob replied, his voice low. "Just a little farther." They emerged onto a quiet street, lined with closed shops. Bob approached the back door of a small diner, knocked 3 times, paused, then twice more. The door opened to reveal a large man with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Frank, I need a favor," Bob said. Frank's gaze shifted to Emma, then back to Bob. Understanding passed between the men. "Kitchen's closed, but I think I can find some hot chocolate," Frank said, gesturing them inside. The diner's kitchen was warm and smelled of grease and baked goods. Emma's stomach growled audibly. She hadn't eaten since lunch at school. "Hungry, little miss?" Frank asked, already pulling a plate from a warming oven. He set a grilled cheese sandwich and some fries in front of her. "Just saved this from being tossed out." Emma looked to Bob, who nodded. "It's okay, Emma. Frank's a friend." As Emma ate, the 2 men spoke in hushed tones. She caught fragments. "Not safe to go back, and it can't involve authorities yet." When she finished, Bob sat across from her. "Emma, can you tell me about your dad? Why were you running from him?" Emma stared at her empty plate. "He gets mad a lot. Since Mom died, he's different. He drinks the bad-smelling stuff and breaks things." She looked up, her eyes welling with tears. "Tonight he was looking for money. He already took my birthday money from Grandma, but he wanted more." Bob's jaw tightened. "Does he hurt you, Emma?" Emma shrugged, a gesture too world-weary for her 7 years. "He grabs my arm sometimes. Mostly he just yells and breaks things." Bob exchanged a look with Frank, who nodded slightly and disappeared into the front of the diner. "Where's your mom?" Bob asked gently. "Heaven," Emma replied simply. 2 years ago, she got sick really fast. Dad says it's my fault because the doctors cost too much money." Bob's hands clenched under the table, but his voice remained calm. "That's not true, Emma. It's not your fault. That's what my teacher, Mrs. Wilson, says too." "She sounds smart," Bob smiled. "Listen, Emma, I want to help you, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Emma studied him, head tilted. "You don't seem like a homeless person," she said bluntly. "Your hands are too clean, and you talk like my principal." A smile tugged at Bob's lips. "You're very observant." He leaned forward. "I'm not really homeless, Emma. I just dress this way sometimes." "Like a costume?" Emma asked, her interest piqued. "Something like that," Bob nodded. "I'm trying to find special people." "What kind of special people?" "People with kind hearts. People who would help a stranger even when they have very little themselves." Frank returned before Bob could say more. "Your dad's outside," he whispered urgently, "asking questions at the convenience store across the street." Emma's face drained of color. She grabbed her teddy bear, ready to run again. "It's okay," Bob assured her, rising to his feet with that same unexpected grace. "Frank has a room upstairs where you can rest. I'm going to talk to your father." "No!" Emma cried, grabbing his arm. "He'll hurt you." Bob gently detached her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "He won't. I promise. Frank will stay with you, and I'll be back soon." As Frank led Emma toward a back staircase, she looked over her shoulder at Bob. The shabby coat and beard couldn't hide something she now saw clearly. Power. Bob stood like someone who wasn't afraid of anything, not even her father. "Be careful," she called. Bob nodded once, then slipped out the back door into the rainy night, leaving Emma wondering who this mysterious man really was. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows of the small apartment above the diner. Emma sat cross-legged on a worn couch, wrapped in a blanket Frank had provided. Her teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, was propped beside her as she sipped hot chocolate. Despite the comfort, her eyes kept darting to the door. "He'll be back, kid," Frank assured her, setting down a plate of cookies. "Bob can handle himself." "Is Bob rich?" Emma asked suddenly. "He's pretending to be homeless, but he's not." Frank chuckled. "You could say that." He studied her face. "You're pretty smart for 7. Emma shrugged. "Mom said I notice things." She picked up a cookie but didn't eat it. "My dad's really strong, and mean when he drinks." Frank sat in an armchair across from her. Want to know a secret about Bob? When Emma nodded eagerly, he continued, Bob grew up just like you. His dad was mean too. Really? Emma's eyes widened. Really? Someone helped Bob when he was a kid, and now he helps others. That's why he sits on the street sometimes. He's looking for people who need help. Emma considered this. But why dress like a homeless person? Because, came Bob's voice from the doorway, people show their true selves when they think no one important is watching. Emma jumped up, relief flooding her face. You're okay. Bob entered, closing the door behind him. He'd removed his shabby outer coat, revealing cleaner clothes underneath. His face was damp from the rain, but he seemed unharmed. I told you I would be, he said, smiling. Your father is gone for now. He seemed impaired. That means drunk, Emma translated matter-of-factly. Where did he go? Back toward your apartment, Bob replied, taking a seat beside her on the couch. Emma, I need to ask you some questions, and it's important that you tell me the truth, okay? Emma nodded solemnly. Is there someone you could stay with for a while? Grandparents? Aunts or uncles? Emma shook her head. Grandma lives in Florida, but Dad says we can't afford to visit. Mom's parents died before I was born. Any other relatives? Friends your dad might let you stay with? Mrs. Wilson lets me stay after school sometimes when Dad has to work late. She's nice. Bob nodded thoughtfully. Your teacher? Yeah. She gives me books to read and doesn't make me feel bad when I don't have lunch money. Bob and Frank exchanged a significant look. Emma, would you feel safe going home if your dad has calmed down? Bob asked carefully. Emma's small shoulders tensed. I guess. He usually sleeps after he gets really mad, but... She trailed off. But what? Bob prompted gently. He said he needs money by tomorrow. For the bad men. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They came to our door last week. Dad was really scared. Bob's expression darkened. Bad men. They had tattoos on their hands. Dad said I should hide in my closet until they left. Emma clutched Mr. Buttons tighter. They said they'd come back. Frank muttered something under his breath and walked to the window, peering out at the rain-slicked street below. Bob took Emma's small hands in his. Emma, I want you to stay here tonight. Frank has a spare bedroom, and I promise you'll be safe. Tomorrow morning I'll take you to school, and then I'm going to fix this, all of it. Can you fix my dad too? Emma asked, her voice small. Make him like he was before Mom died? Something flashed in Bob's eyes, a mixture of compassion and determination. I'm going to try, Emma. People who are hurting sometimes hurt others. It doesn't make it right, but it means they need help too. Emma studied his face. You're not really just Bob, are you? A smile touched his lips. My full name is Robert Edward Thornton, but my friends call me Bob. Emma gasped, her eyes growing wide. Like Thornton Towers? My dad used to work there before. Bob nodded. That's right. And now I'm going to help both of you. As Emma processed this revelation, a crash of thunder shook the windows. Frank returned from his vigil. Storm's getting worse. You staying too, Bob? Bob shook his head. I have some calls to make. He turned to Emma. But I'll be back first thing in the morning to take you to school, I promise. Pinky, promise? Emma held out her smallest finger. Bob linked his pinky with hers. Pinky promise. After Bob left, Emma lay in the spare bedroom, listening to the storm. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. As she drifted to sleep, she wondered about Robert Thornton, the man who pretended to be homeless, and why he had chosen to help her. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Emma woke to the smell of pancakes and the unfamiliar comfort of clean sheets. For a moment, she thought she was back in the old apartment before Mom died, before Dad changed. Then reality returned. She was in Frank's spare room above the diner. She padded barefoot to the kitchen, clutching Mr. Buttons. Good morning, sunshine, Frank greeted, flipping a pancake. Sleep okay? Emma nodded, climbing onto a stool at the counter. Is Bob coming back? He said 7:30 sharp. Frank glanced at the clock. That's in about 20 minutes. Plenty of time for breakfast. As Emma ate, she asked, "Is Mr. Thornton really, really rich?" Frank chuckled. "Yes, he is, but that's not the important thing about him." "What is?" "He remembers what it was like to be afraid." Frank set a glass of orange juice before her. "Most people forget when they get money. They forget what matters." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Frank checked through the peephole before opening it. "Right on time," he said as Bob entered. Emma hardly recognized him. Gone was the shabby coat and worn jeans. In their place were pressed slacks and a cashmere sweater. His beard had been trimmed, his hair styled. He looked like the executives she'd seen entering Thornton Towers when her father still worked there. "Good morning, Emma," Bob said, his voice unchanged despite his transformation. "Ready for school?" Emma stared. "You look different." Bob smiled. "This is how I usually look, but it's still me." Emma scrutinized him, then nodded her acceptance. "Still Bob." After breakfast, Bob drove Emma to school in a sleek black car. As they pulled up, Emma's nervousness returned. "What if my dad comes here? He knows where I go to school." Bob's expression was reassuring but serious. "I've arranged for someone to watch the school today. No one will bother you." He handed her a small cell phone. "This has only one button. If you feel unsafe or if anyone makes you uncomfortable, press it, and I'll come immediately." Emma took the phone reverently. "Like a secret agent?" "Exactly like that," Bob smiled. "Now, is Mrs. Wilson here today?" Emma nodded. "She teaches second grade." "That's me. I'd like to speak with her before you go to class. Is that okay?" Inside the school, Mrs. Wilson was writing on the blackboard when they entered her classroom. She turned, her welcoming smile faltering when she saw Bob. "May I help you?" she asked, glancing protectively at Emma. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm Robert Thornton. I need to speak with you about Emma's situation." Recognition dawned on the teacher's face. "Mr. Thornton, of Thornton Industries?" She looked from him to Emma in confusion. "Emma, why don't you put your backpack at your desk while Mrs. Wilson and I chat?" Bob suggested. As Emma arranged her meager school supplies, she watched Bob speak quietly to Mrs. Wilson. The teacher's expression changed from confusion to concern to understanding. She glanced at Emma several times, nodding. Finally, Mrs. Wilson approached Emma's desk, kneeling to eye level. "Emma, honey, Mr. Thornton has explained some things to me. I want you to know that you're safe here today, okay? And we're going to make sure you stay safe." Emma nodded solemnly. "Bob's helping my dad too." Mrs. Wilson's eyes softened. "That's good to hear." She straightened up. "Now, we're starting with math today. Why don't you get your notebook ready?" As the other students began filing in, Bob prepared to leave. "Remember, Emma, press the button if you need anything. I'll pick you up after school." "What about my dad?" Emma asked quietly. Bob's expression remained reassuring. "I'm meeting with him today. We're going to work things out." Throughout the day, Emma found herself reaching into her pocket to touch the phone, reassured by its presence. For the first time in months, she was able to focus on lessons without worrying about what awaited her at home. When the final bell rang, Emma half expected her father to be waiting, red-faced and angry. Instead, she found Bob's black car idling at the curb. "How was school?" he asked as she climbed in. "Good. I got a gold star in spelling." "That's excellent." Bob's smile seemed genuine. "I spoke with your father today." Emma tensed. "Was he mad?" "He was troubled," Bob replied carefully, "but we had a good talk. He's agreed to get some help." "What kind of help?" "The kind for people who drink too much, and for people who are very sad." Bob turned to face her. "Emma, your father won't be coming home for a little while. He's going to stay somewhere where doctors can help him feel better." Emma processed this. "Like a hospital, similar to that. It's called a rehabilitation center." "So where will I stay?" A note of anxiety crept into her voice. "That's something we need to discuss," Bob said gently. There are a few options. You could stay with Frank for a bit longer. Or there are families who take care of children while their parents are getting better. And foster care, Emma said knowledgeably. Jessie in my class is in foster care. She doesn't like it. Bob seemed impressed by her understanding. That's one possibility, yes, but I was thinking of another option. He hesitated. Emma, would you like to stay at my house while your father gets better? I have plenty of room, and my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, is very kind. Emma's eyes widened. At your house? Like where you really live? Bob nodded. It's a big decision. You don't have to answer right away. Emma thought for a moment. Would I still go to my school? Absolutely. And can I visit my dad? When the doctors say it's okay, yes. Emma clutched Mr. Buttons to her chest. I'd like to stay with you, she said finally. You make me feel safe. The first time Emma saw Thornton Estate, she thought it must be a mistake. The wrought iron gates opened to reveal a long driveway flanked by towering oaks. At its end stood a stately mansion of stone and brick with large windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. This is your house? She gasped as the car crunched over the gravel drive. One of them, Bob replied with a hint of embarrassment. This is where I stay when I'm in Boston. As they approached the entrance, the massive front door swung open. A petite Asian woman in her 50s emerged, her posture perfect, her smile warm. Welcome home, Mr. Thornton, she said, her accent slight but noticeable. Her gaze fell on Emma, softening immediately. And this must be Miss Emma. Mrs. Chen, this is Emma Watson, Bob introduced. Emma, this is Mrs. Chen. She runs the household and makes the best cookies in Massachusetts. Hello, Emma said shyly, clutching Mr. Buttons tighter. Mrs. Chen bent slightly, meeting Emma's eyes. Your room is ready, Miss Emma. Would you like to see it? Emma looked to Bob, who nodded encouragingly. She followed Mrs. Chen through a grand foyer and up a sweeping staircase. The house was beautiful, but intimidating, with high ceilings and artwork that looked expensive. Here we are, Mrs. Chen announced, opening a door on the second floor. Emma stepped inside and froze. The room was larger than their entire apartment. A canopy bed with a pink comforter dominated one wall. Bookshelves lined another, filled with children's titles. A window seat overlooked the manicured grounds, and a desk sat in one corner. Most surprising of all was the small collection of toys arranged on a shelf, dolls, a small tea set, and building blocks. Is this all for me? She whispered, overwhelmed. Mr. Thornton wanted you to be comfortable, Mrs. Chen replied. The bathroom is through that door. Dinner will be at 6. Is there anything special you'd like? Emma shook her head, still taking in the room. I'll leave you to settle in, Mrs. Chen said kindly. Mr. Thornton is in his study when you're ready to come down. Alone, Emma approached the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines. Many were titles she'd admired in the school library, but never had the chance to borrow. She set Mr. Buttons on the bed, noting how small and worn he looked against the luxurious bedding. A soft knock drew her attention. Bob stood in the doorway. What do you think? He asked. It's really big, she replied honestly. And pretty. Bob entered, sitting on the window seat. It might take some getting used to. If there's anything you want changed, just let me know. Emma nodded, then asked the question weighing on her mind. Did you really talk to my dad? Is he really getting help? Bob's expression grew serious. Yes, Emma, I did, and he is. It wasn't an easy conversation, but your father agreed to get treatment. Was it because of the bad men? Emma asked. The ones who wanted money? Bob hesitated, then nodded. Your father owes money to some dangerous people. I've taken care of that debt, but the more important thing is helping him recover. Emma's brow furrowed. You gave them money. How much? That's not important, Bob assured her. What matters is that your father can focus on getting better now. Emma processed this. But why would you do that? Why help us? Bob was quiet for a moment. Do you remember when we met and you offered me your $5? Emma nodded. That was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in a very long time. Not because of the money, but because you saw someone in need and wanted to help, even though you had so little yourself. Bob's voice grew soft. That's rare, Emma. More rare than you might think. But you weren't really homeless, Emma pointed out. No, I wasn't, but you didn't know that. Bob leaned forward. I've been searching for something, Emma. Something important. And I think I found it when you reached out to help me. Before Emma could ask what he meant, Mrs. Chen called them for dinner. As they descended the grand staircase, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to Bob's story, and perhaps to her own, than she yet understood. That night, surrounded by luxury but missing the familiar sounds of her old home, Emma lay awake. Despite the comfortable bed and the safety she felt, questions tumbled through her mind. Why had Bob been pretending to be homeless? Why had he chosen to help her and her father? And what would happen when her father got better? Outside her window, the moon cast silver light across the manicured lawn of Thornton Estate. Emma thought of her father, wondering if he was looking at the same moon from wherever he was staying. She hoped the doctors were being nice to him. With these thoughts, she finally drifted to sleep, Mr. Buttons clutched tightly to her chest, in a room more beautiful than any she had ever imagined calling her own. 2 weeks passed in a blur of new routines. Each morning, Mrs. Chen prepared breakfast while Bob checked emails at the dining table. They would drive Emma to school together, and either Bob or his driver Marcus would pick her up in the afternoon. Evenings were spent doing homework, eating dinner as a trio, and reading books from the extensive library. Emma was adapting to life at Thornton Estate, but questions continued to simmer beneath the surface. She hadn't seen or spoken to her father. When she asked about him, Bob would simply say he was making progress, but wasn't ready for visitors. On a crisp Saturday morning, Emma found Bob in his home office, working despite the weekend. She hovered in the doorway until he noticed her. "Good morning, Emma. Everything okay?" She twisted the hem of her shirt, a nervous habit. "Can I ask you something?" Bob set aside his tablet. "Of course. Come in." Emma perched on the edge of a leather chair. "At school, we're doing a family tree project." She hesitated. "Mrs. Wilson said I could just do my side, but—" "But you're wondering about your father," Bob finished gently. Emma nodded. "When can I see him? It's been 2 weeks." Bob's expression grew serious. "I spoke with your father's doctors yesterday. He's doing better, but recovery takes time." "What's wrong with him, really?" Emma pressed. "You said he was sad, but lots of people are sad and they don't yell or break things." Bob considered his words carefully. "Your father has something called alcohol dependency. That means his body and mind think they need alcohol. That's the bad-smelling stuff, to function. When he drinks it, it changes how he thinks and acts. He's also suffering from depression, which is a kind of sadness that's very hard to shake off. Because Mom died, that's part of it." "Yes." Emma absorbed this. "The kids at school talk about my dad. They say he's a drunk." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but pain flickered in her eyes. Anger flashed briefly across Bob's face before he controlled it. "That's not fair of them. Your father is sick and he's getting help." "Will he get better?" "I believe he will," Bob said firmly. "But it will take time and effort on his part." Emma nodded thoughtfully, then changed direction. "Why were you pretending to be homeless when I met you?" The abrupt question caught Bob off guard. He leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at his lips. "That's a complicated story. The short version is that I was looking for something." "What?" "Genuineness, real kindness." Bob's eyes grew distant. "When you have money, Emma, people treat you differently. They want things from you. They pretend to like you. It becomes hard to know who your real friends are." Emma considered this. So you dress like a homeless person to see who's nice to you anyway? Something like that, yes. Bob studied her. You were the first person in 3 days to even speak to me, and you offered me your last $5. Emma shrugged. You looked sad. A buzz from Bob's phone interrupted them. He glanced at it, his expression changing subtly. Emma, I need to take this call, but afterward, how would you like to go visit the aquarium? I hear they have a new octopus exhibit. Emma's face lit up. Really? Can we? Bob nodded, already reaching for his phone. Go ask Mrs. Chen to help you get ready. As Emma skipped from the room, Bob answered the call, his voice dropping to a serious tone. What did you find out? That afternoon at the aquarium, Emma pressed her face against the glass of the giant ocean tank, watching as colorful fish swam past. Bob stood beside her, pointing out different species. Look at that one. That's a blue tang, just like Dory from Finding Nemo. Emma giggled. I love that movie. Mom used to watch it with me. At the mention of her mother, Bob placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Tell me about her. Emma's expression softened. She was pretty, and she laughed a lot. She used to call me her little sunshine. Dad called her that too before. She trailed off, her attention caught by a large sea turtle gliding past. I miss her. I'm sure you do, Bob said softly. What was her name? Sarah Watson. Emma tilted her head. Did you know her? You and Dad both worked at Thornton Towers. Something flickered in Bob's eyes. I didn't know her personally, no. Your father worked in our IT department, correct? Emma nodded. Until he got fired. That's when everything got really bad. Before Bob could respond, his phone buzzed again. He checked it, his expression growing troubled. Emma, I'm sorry, but we need to cut our visit short. There's something I need to take care of. Disappointment crossed Emma's face, but she nodded bravely. Is it about Dad? No, Bob assured her. Just business. I promise we'll come back next weekend and see everything we missed. On the drive home, Emma noticed Bob was distracted, checking his phone frequently. When they arrived at the estate, he spoke briefly to Marcus, then turned to her. Emma, I need to go into the office for a few hours. Mrs. Chen will take care of you. I should be back for dinner. Is something wrong? Emma asked, sensing his tension. Bob hesitated, then knelt to her level. Nothing for you to worry about. Sometimes being a businessman means dealing with unexpected problems. After he left, Emma wandered through the massive house, eventually finding herself in a wing she hadn't explored before. Most doors were closed, but one stood slightly ajar. Curiosity drew her inside. It was a home theater with plush seats facing a giant screen. On one wall hung framed movie posters, on another, family photographs. Emma approached these, studying the images of people she didn't recognize, until her eyes fell on one particular photo. It showed a young Bob, perhaps college-aged, with his arm around a laughing young woman. Something about her smile, her eyes, seemed hauntingly familiar. Miss Emma? Mrs. Chen's voice came from the doorway. This area is private. Emma turned, the question already forming on her lips. Mrs. Chen, who is that woman with Bob in the picture? Mrs. Chen approached, glancing at the photograph. Her expression softened with what looked like sadness. That was Mr. Thornton's sister, Eleanor. Was? Emma asked, noting the past tense. She passed away several years ago. Mrs. Chen gently guided Emma toward the door. Come. Dinner will be ready soon. Mr. Thornton should be home shortly. As they walked back to the main part of the house, Emma couldn't shake the image from her mind, or the strange feeling that she'd seen that woman's smile before. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The photograph of Bob and the woman named Eleanor kept appearing in her mind. There was something about her smile, her eyes, something familiar that Emma couldn't place. She slipped out of bed and padded to her backpack, where she kept a small photo album. It contained the few pictures she'd managed to save of her mother. Emma flipped through the worn pages until she found what she was looking for, her favorite photo of her mom, taken at a beach when Emma was 4. Clutching the album, Emma crept back to the home theater. The house was silent, with only the soft glow of security lights illuminating the hallways. She pushed open the door and approached the wall of photographs. In the dim light, she held her mother's photo beside the framed picture of Bob and Eleanor. The resemblance was striking. The same curve of the smile, the same slight dimple in the left cheek. They could have been sisters. "Emma?" Bob's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, still in his business clothes. "What are you doing up so late?" Emma turned, holding out her album. "She looks like my mom." Bob approached slowly, taking the album from her small hands. He stared at Sarah Watson's photograph for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said finally, "she does." He guided Emma to one of the plush theater seats, sitting beside her. "I think it's time I told you the truth, Emma." "About what?" Bob took a deep breath. "Eleanor wasn't just my sister. She was my twin. We were very close." Pain flickered across his face. "She died 8 years ago in a car accident." "I'm sorry," Emma said quietly. She knew all too well the pain of losing someone you loved. "After she died, I changed. I withdrew from people, focused only on business." Bob looked down at the photo album. Eleanor was the kind one, the one who saw the good in people. His voice grew soft. "When she died, I felt like all the goodness went with her. That's why you pretend to be homeless, to find good people like her?" Bob nodded slowly. "In a way. I wanted to see if there was still genuine kindness in the world. Most people walked past. Some even told me to get a job." A sad smile crossed his lips. "Then you came along and offered me your last $5. Emma shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "But why did you really help me? It wasn't just because I was nice, was it?" Bob hesitated. "No, Emma. It wasn't just that." He turned to the wall of photographs and pointed to one Emma hadn't noticed before. It showed Eleanor holding a baby, her face radiant with joy. "This is Eleanor with her daughter, my niece." Emma studied the photo. "What happened to her? The baby?" "Eleanor and her husband died in the accident. Their daughter survived." Bob's voice grew tight. "She was adopted by a young couple. The husband worked for me briefly." Realization dawned slowly on Emma's face. "My mom and dad?" Bob nodded. "Your mother was already sick when I found out where you were. By the time I located you, she had passed away. And your father." He trailed off. "You're my uncle?" Emma whispered, trying to process this revelation. "Yes, Emma, I'm your uncle. Eleanor was your birth mother." Bob's eyes were moist. "I've been looking for you for 5 years." Emma sat in stunned silence, pieces falling into place. "Is that why you were outside our apartment that night?" "I'd finally tracked you down. I'd been watching for days, trying to figure out how to approach your father." Bob's expression darkened. "I saw how he was living, how he was treating you. I was going to contact child services, but then you ran right to me. Does my dad know that I'm not? That Mom and him?" "I don't think so," Bob said gently. "The adoption was closed. Your parents may have known Eleanor was your birth mother, but they wouldn't have known she was my sister." Emma stared at the photo of Eleanor holding the baby, her as an infant. "So my real mom died when I was 2, and then the mom who raised me died when I was 5. Tears welled in her eyes. "That's not fair." Bob put his arm around her shoulders. "No, Emma, it's not fair at all." He hesitated. "Your father, David, he loves you. But he's been through a lot. Losing Sarah broke something in him." "What happens now?" Emma asked, her small voice quavering. Bob squeezed her shoulder gently. "That depends partly on you and partly on how your father's recovery goes. But I want you to know that no matter what, you have a home with me. You're my family, Emma. The only family I have left." As Emma processed this revelation, a new thought occurred to her. Is that why you're so rich? Because you're sad and lonely like in the movies? Despite the gravity of the moment, Bob laughed. A genuine laugh that seemed to surprise even him. No, Emma, I was wealthy before Eleanor died. But you're right about one thing. I have been lonely. His expression sobered. Until now. 3 days after Bob's revelation, Emma sat in the back of his sleek black car, her stomach knotted with anxiety. They were driving to the rehabilitation center to visit her father for the first time. What if he's still mad? Emma asked, fidgeting with Mr. Button's worn ear. Bob, seated beside her, turned from his tablet. The doctors say he's making excellent progress. He's been sober for nearly 3 weeks now. What's sober? It means he hasn't had any alcohol. That's a big accomplishment for someone with his condition. Bob set his tablet aside. Emma, before we arrive, there's something important you should know. I haven't told your father about our relation. Emma's brow furrowed. Why not? It's a lot for someone in recovery to process. The doctors suggested we wait until he's stronger. Bob hesitated. For now, he knows only that I'm helping both of you, because I was impressed by your kindness. Emma nodded slowly. So I can't call you Uncle Bob? A smile touched his lips. Not yet. Just Bob is fine. The rehabilitation center wasn't what Emma had imagined. Instead of the sterile hospital she'd feared, it was a large house set on manicured grounds, with gardens and walking paths. They were led to a sunlit common room where David Watson waited. Emma hardly recognized her father. The perpetually angry, disheveled man had been replaced by someone clear-eyed and neatly dressed. His face had filled out, and the constant tension in his shoulders seemed lessened. "Emma," he said, rising from his chair. He looked uncertain, as if not sure how she would react to him. Emma hesitated, then ran to him. He knelt, enfolding her in his arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry for everything." Over her father's shoulder, Emma saw Bob watching them, his expression unreadable. The visit went better than Emma had dared hope. Her father seemed genuinely interested in her schoolwork, asking questions about her teachers and friends. He laughed at her stories about Mrs. Chen teaching her to make dumplings, though his expression tightened whenever Bob was mentioned. When Emma went to get hot chocolate from the cafeteria, the two men were left alone. "She looks happy," David said, watching his daughter at the counter. "She's a remarkable child," Bob replied. "Resilient." David's jaw clenched. "I know what you must think of me. You're working on getting better. That's what matters now." "Why are you doing this?" David asked, meeting Bob's gaze directly. "The truth. It's not just because my daughter offered you $5. Bob considered his words carefully. "Let's just say I see potential in Emma. And I believe every child deserves a chance at a good life. Even if that's without me?" There was a challenge in David's voice. "That's not what I want," Bob replied evenly. "Emma needs her father, a healthy father. And if I can't be that, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." Bob's tone was firm, but not unkind. "Your doctors say you're making excellent progress. Focus on that." Emma returned with her hot chocolate, sensing the tension between the adults. "Dad, can I show you the pictures I drew in art class?" Bob hung them on the refrigerator. As Emma pulled drawings from her backpack, David's eyes met Bob's over her head. A silent understanding passed between them. Whatever their differences, Emma's well-being came first. On the drive back to the estate, Emma was quieter than usual. "He seemed better," she finally said. "Not so angry." "Yes," Bob agreed. "The treatment is helping him. When can he leave that place?" Bob chose his words carefully. "That depends on his progress. The program is usually 90 days. And then what happens? Will I go back to living with him?" The question hung in the air. Bob had been preparing for this, but the reality of potentially sending Emma back to an uncertain situation, even with David sober, troubled him deeply. "That's something we'll need to discuss with your father and his doctors when the time comes. A lot depends on his continued recovery." Emma stared out the window. "I want Dad to get better, but I like living with you too." Bob reached over and squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out together, Emma, I promise." What he didn't tell her was that he'd already set wheels in motion, consulting with attorneys about his options for maintaining a role in Emma's life, even if she returned to her father's custody. The revelations about her parentage complicated matters legally, but Bob was determined that whatever happened, he wouldn't lose his niece again. As the car pulled through the gates of Thornton Estate, Emma turned to him. "Bob, what happened to the bad men? The ones Dad owed money to?" Bob's expression remained neutral, though his hand tightened slightly on his phone. "They've been taken care of. They won't bother your father or you again." "Did you pay them?" "In a manner of speaking," Bob replied, offering no further explanation. What Emma didn't know was that the bad men had been low-level enforcers for a loan shark operation. After identifying them, Bob had used his considerable resources to ensure the entire operation was shut down permanently. Some problems required more than just money to solve. As autumn deepened into winter, Emma's life settled into a comfortable routine at Thornton Estate. Weekly visits with her father became a fixed part of her schedule, and each time she noted small improvements. He laughed more, listened better, and the haunted look in his eyes gradually diminished. At school, Emma's grades improved dramatically. With proper nutrition, regular sleep, and no fear hanging over her, she blossomed academically. Mrs. Wilson commented on the transformation at a parent-teacher conference that Bob attended in David's place. "She's a different child," the teacher remarked. "Her reading level has jumped 2 grades, and her math skills are exceptional." Bob nodded, pride evident in his expression. "She's incredibly bright. I've enrolled her in a weekend science program at the Children's Museum. She loves it." Mrs. Wilson hesitated. "And her father, how is he doing?" "Making steady progress," Bob replied. "Emma visits him weekly." "And the living arrangement, is it still temporary?" The question touched on the uncertainty that lingered beneath the surface of their seemingly stable life. Emma had been living at Thornton Estate for nearly 2 months, with no clear end date in sight. "That's still being determined," Bob answered carefully. "Emma's well-being is everyone's priority." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Bob sat in his study reviewing documents his lawyers had prepared. The adoption records confirmed what he'd already known. Eleanor and her husband had put their daughter up for closed adoption after realizing they weren't ready for parenthood. Sarah and David Watson had adopted the infant, never knowing the biological mother was the sister of David's employer. The legal options before Bob were complex. As Emma's biological uncle, he could petition for custody based on David's documented history of neglect and alcohol abuse. But such a move would be devastating to both Emma and David, especially now that David was working hard on recovery. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Chen entered with a cup of tea. "You've been up late every night this week," she observed, setting the cup on his desk. "I have a lot on my mind," Bob admitted. Mrs. Chen had worked for him for 15 years and was one of the few people who spoke to him with complete candor. "You've changed since that little girl came into your life," she said. "For the better." Bob smiled faintly. "She reminds me so much of Eleanor." "Not just in looks," Mrs. Chen noted. "She has the same spirit, the same kindness." "Yes." Bob sipped the tea thoughtfully. "I can't lose her again, Chen. But I don't want to destroy her relationship with the only father she's ever known." "Then don't make it a choice between you or him," Mrs. Chen said simply. "Find another way." The next morning, Emma found Bob in the kitchen making pancakes, a Saturday tradition they'd established. She climbed onto a stool at the counter, watching as he flipped a perfectly golden disc. "Can we visit the aquarium again today?" she asked. "We never got to finish seeing everything." "Actually," Bob said, sliding a pancake onto her plate, "I thought we might visit your father instead. The doctors have given him a day pass. If you'd like, we could all do something together." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Dad can leave the center?" Bob nodded. "For the day, yes. It's part of his reintegration therapy." He kept his tone casual, though the arrangement had taken considerable negotiation. "I thought we might take him to the aquarium, actually. What do you think?" "Yes," Emma said excitedly, then paused. "But will you and Dad be okay together? You seem tense sometimes." Bob smiled at her perceptiveness. "We'll be fine. This day is about you and your father." The outing was initially awkward. David was clearly uncomfortable with Bob's presence and the obvious wealth that surrounded them, the luxury car, the casually expensive clothes, the way Bob didn't even glance at prices when buying tickets and souvenirs. But as the day progressed, the focus shifted to Emma's excitement as she led them from exhibit to exhibit. By the time they reached the penguin habitat, David had relaxed enough to engage in conversation with Bob about Emma's progress at school. "Mrs. Wilson says she's reading above grade level now," Bob mentioned, as they watched Emma press her face against the glass, delighted by the bird's antics. "Sarah would be proud," David said quietly. "She always believed Emma was gifted." "She is," Bob agreed. "She deserves every opportunity to develop that potential." David's expression grew serious. "I know what you're really saying, Thornton. You think she's better off with you." "That's not—" "No, let me finish," David interrupted. "You're probably right. You can give her everything I can't. Stability, education, opportunities." His voice grew strained. "But I'm her father. I've raised her since she was a baby." Bob chose his next words with extreme care. "David, I don't want to take Emma from you, but I also don't want to disappear from her life when you complete your program." David studied him. "Why do you care so much about my daughter? The real reason." Bob hesitated, acutely aware they were in a public place, with Emma only steps away. "This isn't the time or place for that conversation," he said finally. "But I promise you my intentions are honorable. I only want what's best for Emma." "Dad! Bob!" Emma called, running to them. "The penguin keeper is going to feed them. Come see." The moment passed as they followed Emma to watch the feeding presentation. But Bob knew the question wouldn't remain unanswered forever. Sooner or later, he would have to tell David the truth about who Emma really was, and what that meant for all of them. The first snow of December transformed Thornton Estate into a winter wonderland. Emma woke to find the grounds blanketed in white, icicles hanging from the eaves like crystal decorations. She pressed her face to the window, breath fogging the glass. "Mrs. Chen says you've never built a proper snowman," Bob said from the doorway, already dressed in casual clothes, a rare sight. "I thought we might remedy that today." Emma spun around, face alight. "Really? Can we?" An hour later, they were in the middle of the vast lawn, rolling enormous snowballs. Mrs. Chen watched from the terrace, occasionally snapping photos with her phone. Emma's cheeks were flushed with cold and excitement as they assembled the 3 sections of their creation. "He needs a face," Emma declared, standing back to survey their work. "I believe I have just the thing," Bob replied. He pulled a small bag from his pocket, producing a carrot, 2 lumps of coal, and a handful of buttons. "You came prepared," Emma giggled. "A successful businessman always plans ahead," Bob said with mock seriousness. As they added the finishing touches, Emma grew quiet. "Christmas is coming," she said finally. "Will Dad be able to come here, or do I have to visit him at the center?" Bob had been anticipating this question. "Actually, I've been talking with your father's doctors. If he continues his progress, they're considering releasing him to outpatient treatment just before Christmas." Emma's eyes widened. He can come home? Well, that's something we need to discuss. Bob knelt in the snow to meet her eyes. Your father won't be ready to live on his own right away. He'll need a supportive environment, continued therapy, and a stable job. Can he stay here with us? The question was innocent, direct, and complicated. Bob had been wrestling with this very issue for weeks. That's one possibility we're exploring, he said carefully, but there are others. Like what? I own several properties in Boston. One is a small apartment building where some of my employees live. There's a 2-bedroom unit available that would be perfect for you and your father. Bob brushed snow from his gloves. It's in your school district, close to a good outpatient center, and the building has a supervisor who could help if needed. Emma frowned. But then, we wouldn't live with you anymore. You would stay with me until your father is settled, Bob assured her, and after that, you could visit whenever you want. The apartment would be yours for as long as you need it. The arrangement was more generous than Bob had described. The building supervisor, a retired social worker named Patricia, had been specifically hired to provide oversight for David's transition. The apartment had been renovated with high-end finishes and filled with new furniture. And most importantly, Bob had established a trust for Emma that would cover her education through college, regardless of David's ability to provide. But what if? Emma trailed off, her voice small. What if what, Emma? What if Dad starts drinking again? The fear in her eyes was painful to see. Bob placed his hands on her shoulders. That's a valid concern. Your father has a disease that's never fully cured, only managed, but he's working very hard and he has a lot of support. He squeezed gently. And no matter what happens, you will always have a home with me. Always. Before Emma could respond, a security guard approached from the house. Mr. Thornton, there's a situation that requires your attention. Bob stood. I'll be right there. To Emma, he said, Finish Mr. Snowman's scarf. I'll be back shortly. In his study, Bob found Marcus waiting with an expression that immediately put him on alert. What is it? Tut. Joseph Brennan was released from county jail this morning, Marcus reported. He was spotted at a bar near Watson's old apartment, asking questions. Bob's expression hardened. Brennan was the loan shark who had been threatening David before Bob intervened. The man had spent the last 2 months in jail on unrelated charges, a convenient arrangement Bob had facilitated through contacts in law enforcement. I thought we had an understanding with Mr. Brennan, Bob said coldly. Apparently not. Marcus handed him a phone. He left a message. Bob listened, his expression darkening with each word of the thinly veiled threat. Brennan hadn't forgotten about David's debt, nor had he appreciated Bob's interference. Now he was making noises about collecting what he was owed and teaching people lessons. Increase security here and at Emma's school, Bob ordered, and find Brennan. I want to know his every move. Should we inform the police? Bob considered this. Not yet. I want to handle this, privately. After Marcus left, Bob stood at his window, watching Emma put the finishing touches on their snowman. The peaceful scene contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts in his mind. He had worked too hard, come too far to let someone like Joseph Brennan threaten the fragile happiness they were building. The time for half measures was past. Bob pulled out his private phone and dialed a number he rarely used. It's Thornton, he said when the call connected. We have a problem that needs to be permanently solved. Outside, oblivious to the danger lurking at the edges of her new life, Emma carefully wrapped a scarf around the snowman's neck, her face glowing with the simple joy of childhood, a joy Bob was determined to protect at any cost. Christmas Eve arrived with a gentle snowfall and an atmosphere of nervous anticipation at Thornton Estate. David Watson was being released today, and Emma had spent the morning helping Mrs. Chen prepare his room, the guest suite furthest from Bob's master bedroom, a neutral territory for the delicate arrangement they were about to embark upon. "Do you think he'll like it?" Emma asked, arranging a small vase of holly on the nightstand. "It's very thoughtful," Mrs. Chen assured her, smoothing the duvet. "Your father will appreciate the effort." Emma had insisted on decorating the room herself, adding personal touches like a framed photo of her mother and a hand-drawn Christmas card. The suite was elegant but not overwhelmingly luxurious. Bob had been careful to choose furnishings that wouldn't make David feel more out of place than he inevitably would. At noon, Bob and Emma departed to pick up David from the rehabilitation center. The facility was quiet, many residents having already left for holiday passes with family. David waited in the lobby, a single duffel bag at his feet. 60 days of sobriety had transformed him. He stood straighter, his face no longer haggard, his eyes clear and focused. "Dad!" Emma rushed to hug him. David enfolded her in his arms, holding her as if afraid she might disappear. "There's my girl," he said, voice thick with emotion. Over her head, his eyes met Bob's, wary but no longer hostile. The car ride was filled with Emma's excited chatter about Christmas preparations, the enormous tree in Thornton's foyer, and the cookies she'd helped Mrs. Chen bake. David listened, smiling at her enthusiasm while taking in the radical change in his daughter. She was still his Emma, but more confident, more articulate, healthier in every way. At the estate, David tried to mask his discomfort as they passed through the imposing gates and approached the mansion. Bob had visited him privately 2 days earlier, explaining the temporary living arrangement and outlining the transition plan to the apartment. David had agreed, recognizing it was the best option for Emma's stability, but the reality of staying under Thornton's roof was still jarring. "This is your room," Emma announced, proudly leading him into the guest suite. "I decorated it for you. Do you like it?" David took in the thoughtful touches, especially the photograph of Sarah. "It's perfect, sweetheart, thank you." "I'll leave you two to get settled," Bob said. "Dinner is at 6, but please make yourself at home until then." Alone with his daughter, David sat on the edge of the bed. "You seem happy here, Emma." She nodded, climbing up beside him. "Bob is really nice, and Mrs. Chen teaches me stuff, like cooking and some Chinese words." She hesitated. "But I missed you." David pulled her close. "I missed you too, more than you know. And I'm sorry, Emma. Sorry for everything that happened before. Are you better now? Really better?" "I'm working on it," David replied honestly. "Every day. And I'm going to keep working on it, I promise." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "Bob says we're going to live in an apartment soon. Just you and me." "That's right. But I'll need to find a job first, get back on my feet." "Bob says he can help with that too." David's expression tightened slightly. "I'm sure he does." He'd never been comfortable with charity, especially from someone like Thornton, whose wealth was so vast it made David's entire life seem insignificant by comparison. "Dad," Emma said, suddenly serious, "there's something important I need to tell you." She pulled away to look at him directly. "It's about Bob, and why he's helping us." David froze. "What do you mean?" "He's my uncle," Emma said simply. "My real mom, my birth mom, was his sister." The revelation hit David like a physical blow. He stared at his daughter, trying to process her words. "How? How do you know this?" Emma explained about finding the photograph, the resemblance to Sarah, and Bob's subsequent confirmation of their relationship. As she spoke, pieces fell into place in David's mind. Thornton's inexplicable interest in them, his generosity, his determination to remain in Emma's life. "Does he have proof of this?" David asked, his voice strained. Emma shrugged. "He has pictures, and he said there are papers." "And he just told you this, without discussing it with me first?" Anger crept into David's tone. "Don't be mad," Emma pleaded. "He was going to tell you, but the doctors said to wait until you were stronger." David took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. His recovery had taught him to pause before reacting, to consider consequences. "I'm not mad at you, Emma. I'm just surprised." "Are you mad at Bob?" Before David could answer, a knock came at the door. Mrs. Chen stood there, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Thornton would like to speak with Mr. Watson in his study, if that's convenient." David nodded stiffly. "I'll be right there." To Emma he said, "We'll talk more later, okay?" In the hallway, David followed Mrs. Chen through the maze of the mansion, his mind racing. If what Emma said was true, it changed everything. The adoption had been closed. He and Sarah had never known the identity of their daughter's biological parents. The coincidence of it being Thornton's sister seemed too incredible to believe. The study door stood open. Bob was at his desk, his expression grave. "Emma told you," he said, without preamble as David entered. "Is it true?" David demanded. Bob gestured to a chair. "Please sit. This is a conversation we should have had weeks ago." David remained standing. "Answer the question, Thornton. Is Emma your niece?" "Yes." Bob opened a drawer and removed a folder. "I have the adoption records here, along with DNA confirmation. Eleanor was my twin sister. Emma is her daughter, my niece by blood." The confirmation hit David harder than he'd expected. He sank into the chair, the ground seeming to shift beneath him. "Why didn't you tell me from the beginning?" "Would you have believed me?" Bob countered. "A strange man claiming to be related to your adopted daughter, or would you have seen it as some kind of trick or threat?" David had no answer for that. In his previous state, he likely would have reacted with suspicion and hostility. "I wanted to tell you once you were stable," Bob continued. "Today, in fact. Emma simply beat me to it." "So this is why?" David said, gesturing vaguely at their surroundings. "All of this, the treatment, the apartment, the job offers. It was never about Emma's kindness or your philanthropy. It was about blood." "Not entirely," Bob replied. "But yes, discovering Emma was my niece accelerated my involvement." His expression softened slightly. "David, I'm not trying to take your daughter from you. You're the only father she's ever known, but I do want to be part of her life." David stared at the man across the desk, the billionaire who had inserted himself into their lives, who had rescued them from a desperate situation, who now revealed himself as Emma's blood relative. It was too much to process at once. "I need time to think," he said finally, "and I want to see those papers." Bob pushed the folder across the desk. "Take all the time you need, but remember, tomorrow is Christmas. Whatever else is between us, let's not ruin that for Emma." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the fresh snow glittering under a brilliant blue sky. Emma woke early, too excited to sleep. For the first time in years, Christmas felt like Christmas, with a decorated tree, presents, and most importantly, her father sober and present. She found both men already in the kitchen, an uneasy truce seemingly in effect as they drank coffee on opposite sides of the island. Their conversation halted when she entered, but both smiled warmly at her. "Merry Christmas, Emma," they said almost in unison, then exchanged an awkward glance. "Can we open presents now?" Emma asked, bouncing on her toes. The massive tree in the foyer was surrounded by packages, most with Emma's name. The adults sat on adjacent sofas as she excavated her treasures. Books, art supplies, a tablet for educational games, clothes, and a beautiful handcrafted dollhouse that Bob explained had belonged to his sister as a child. "It was Eleanor's?" Emma asked, running her fingers over the intricate details. Bob nodded. "And now it's yours. I had it restored, but all the furniture and decorations are original." Emma looked from Bob to her father, sensing the tension beneath their polite facade. Last night, after her revelation to her father, the adults had clearly had a difficult conversation. But they were trying, for her sake, to make Christmas normal. "I have presents for you too," she announced. From beneath the tree, she retrieved 2 packages she'd wrapped with Mrs. Chen's help. For her father, she'd drawn a picture of the 2 of them together, framed in popsicle sticks painted silver. "So you can put it in our new apartment," she explained. David's eyes misted as he hugged her. "It's perfect, sweetheart. Thank you." For Bob, she'd made a similar drawing, but this one included 3 figures, Emma, her father, and Bob, standing in front of what looked like Thornton Estate. "It's our family," she said simply. The room went still. David tensed, but as he watched his daughter proudly present the picture to Bob, whose expression showed naked emotion for the first time since they'd met, something shifted in David's understanding. This wasn't about ownership or competition. It was about Emma having more love in her life, not less. Bob cleared his throat, clearly moved. "Thank you, Emma. I'll treasure this." The rest of Christmas Day passed in a haze of food, games, and tentative conversation. By evening, Emma was exhausted from the excitement, falling asleep on the sofa during a holiday movie. David carried her to bed, tucking her in, as he'd done countless times before. When he returned to the main floor, he found Bob in the study, a glass of sparkling water in hand, as he stared out at the moonlit grounds. "She's asleep," David said from the doorway. Bob turned. "She had a good day." "Yes." David entered the room, taking the chair opposite Bob's. "I've been reading the papers you gave me, and thinking." Bob waited silently. "I still don't understand why you didn't try to find her sooner," David said. "You had the resources." "The adoption was closed at Eleanor's insistence," Bob explained. "She and her husband weren't ready for parenthood, but they wanted their child to have a stable, normal life. I respected her wishes." He sipped his water. "After they died, it took time to find the records. By then, Emma was already with you and Sarah, a family. And you just let it go? For 5 years?" Bob's expression clouded. "I checked on her welfare from a distance. You seemed to be good parents. Sarah was." He hesitated. "She reminded me of Eleanor in some ways, kind, gentle." "She was," David agreed, pain evident in his voice. "When she died, I fell apart. I failed Emma completely." "You're working to make it right now," Bob acknowledged. "That counts for something." The 2 men sat in silence for a moment, their complicated shared connection to Emma hanging between them. "I can't compete with you," David said finally. "Your money, this house, the opportunities you can give her, but I'm her father." "I don't want to compete," Bob replied. "I just want to be part of her life, to know the last piece of my sister I have left in this world." David studied the man across from him, not seeing the billionaire now, but someone who had also experienced profound loss. "The apartment, the job offer at your company, that's still on the table?" Bob nodded. "All of it, no strings attached." "There are always strings," David countered, but without bitterness. "In this case, they just happen to be attached to someone who loves my daughter as much as I do." He took a deep breath. "I need to stand on my own feet, to be the father Emma deserves. But I'm not stupid enough to deny her a relationship with her uncle, if that's what she wants." "A compromise, then," Bob suggested. "You and Emma take the apartment. You work on rebuilding your life, with my support, but on your terms. Emma splits her time, primarily with you, but regular visits here. We make decisions about her future together." "Co-parenting with a billionaire," David said with a hint of dry humor. "Not exactly what I expected for my life." "Life rarely gives us what we expect," Bob replied. "Sometimes it's better." 3 months later, Emma sat at the kitchen table in the spacious apartment she now shared with her father. She was finishing homework while David prepared dinner, a skill he'd developed during his recovery. The apartment was bright and comfortable, with large windows overlooking a small park. David had been working at Thornton Industries for 2 months now, in a position that utilized his IT skills without the stress of his previous role. He attended outpatient therapy 3 times a week and hadn't touched alcohol since entering rehab. The apartment supervisor, Patricia, had become a friend and support to both of them. Emma spent weekdays with her father and alternate weekends at Thornton Estate with Bob, or Uncle Bob, as she now called him. The arrangement had its challenges, but as the adults in her life learned to communicate and cooperate, a new kind of family took shape around her. "Dad," Emma said, closing her math book, "do you think Mom would be happy with how things turned out?" David turned from the stove. "Which mom do you mean, sweetheart?" Emma considered this. "Both of them. And Sarah, too." David came to sit beside her, taking her small hands in his. "I think they would all be very proud of you, and happy that you're loved and cared for. And you? Are you happy, Dad?" David smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'm getting there, Emma, one day at a time." He squeezed her hands. "But having you in my life, that makes me happy every single day." Later that evening, as Emma prepared for bed, she looked at the 3 framed photographs on her nightstand. Eleanor holding her as a baby, Sarah laughing at a park, and a recent picture of Emma with both David and Bob at the aquarium, standing before the giant ocean tank. 3 parents, 2 gone but not forgotten, and 2 still here, building something new from the pieces of what had been broken. As she drifted towards sleep, Emma thought about the night she'd fled her father's anger and found a homeless man who turned out to be so much more. She had offered him $5, never imagining that this simple act of kindness would lead to a second chance for all of them. In the darkness, Emma smiled. Perhaps kindness was the most valuable currency.